Black families ran the numbers, and the numbers said, go. Rent that's half what you were paying. A whole house instead of a stacked apartment. A yard the kids can actually stand in. And the first of the month finally stopped feeling like a threat. The rent in these cities really is that cheap. Nobody's lying to you about the rent. They're just not the ones who send the second bill. These are the 10 cheapest cities in America for Black families, and every single one of them has a way of getting the discount back. In one of them, it's the water. Build off how many bedrooms you have. In one, it's 10 days' notice. In one, it's your daughter's blood test. So this list isn't ranked by rent. It isn't ranked by crime. It isn't ranked by weather. It's ranked by 3 things. How much of the discount comes back, how fast you can be removed once it does, and whether the thing it takes is something you can ever get back. The city at number 1 is where the cheapest rent in the Midwest gets priced against something no landlord has to put in the listing. Subscribe if you want all 10 of these, and let's take it from 10. Number 10, Birmingham, Alabama. Birmingham makes you an offer that sounds like a favor. A 3-bedroom in Ensley, for what a studio runs in Atlanta. A porch, a driveway, and neighbors who've been on that block since before your mother was born. Average asking rent in the metro sat around $1,225 last year. And for a Black family coming out of a coastal market, that number reads like a mistake nobody caught. Then you look at how you're supposed to get to work. In 2025, the Birmingham-Jefferson County Transit Authority rolled out what it calls a 70-30 plan. 70% of the service area keeps fixed-route buses. The other 30% gets microtransit only, which is a polite way of saying you call, and then you wait. Route 7 out to Fairfield stopped running. So did Route 48 to South Powderly. The authority said in public that these weren't choices it wanted to make. The budget made them, because Alabama puts exactly 0 state dollars into public transit. Now let's be honest about what that does to a household. Cutting a bus route doesn't save a family money. It moves the cost. Your rent dropped $400, and your car payment, your insurance, your gas, and your tires picked up more than that between them, and the car doesn't care that you moved somewhere cheap. It just bills you in a different envelope, on a different day, and it never once brings up the rent. Ensley families didn't lose a bus. They got handed a car note with a bus schedule stapled to the front of it. That's why Birmingham is number 10 on this list. What comes back is small and it's slow, but it lands every month in the one line item a working family can't skip. Number 9, Toledo, Ohio. Toledo has the most affordable rent in America. So why is the city turning the water back off? A rent affordability analysis last year put Toledo at the top of the entire country, with 91.21% of available rentals costing less than 30% of the average local wage. 1-bedrooms advertised around $727. For Black families in the Junction neighborhood and out through Englewood, that isn't a listing. That's a landing spot. So here's the other number. The city's Public Utilities Department is sitting on roughly $61 million in past due water bills, and about $52 million of that sits on residential accounts. On June 1st, Toledo restarted shutoffs for non-payment after a 6-year pause. 6 years is long enough for a child to start kindergarten and come out the other side of 5th grade. And the utility said the rest of it in public. What it can't collect gets recovered through future rate increases on the customers who do pay. Toledo's delinquency rate went from about 3% before the pandemic to over 4% since. So the bill the family on the corner couldn't cover in March turns up inside the bill of the family 2 doors down who did. Neither household is ever told. Cheap rent pulls people in, the water bill sorts them, and the ones who survive the sorting quietly pay for the ones who didn't. 9th on this list, because what comes back here is a utility folks can actually lose. Toledo will hand a family a whole house for the price of a phone plan and then bill them for the neighbor's shower. Number 8. St. Louis, Missouri. Imagine a water bill that has never once looked at your water. It doesn't know whether you showered this month. It doesn't know the house sat empty all of July. It counts your bedrooms. It counts your bathrooms. It measures how wide your lot is where it meets the street, and it sends you a number built out of that. You could leave town for 6 weeks, and the bill would still arrive, confident, itemized, and wrong. That's how most households in the city of St. Louis get billed, because most of them still aren't metered. For fiscal year 2026, the average monthly residential wastewater bill runs $65.66 for a metered customer and $72.75 for an unmetered one. Same water, different arithmetic. Now let's talk about who lives in the unmetered houses. They're the old ones. In Baden, in Wells Goodfellow, in the Ville, the housing stock is exactly the stock that never got converted, and the Consumers Council of Missouri counted nearly 20,000 households in this city, spending between 6 and 10% of everything they earn on utilities alone. Not the rent, utilities. And St. Louis is the second most affordable metro in America for a black family buying a starter home. About 21% of the local median black household income covers the note. That number is real, and it's why people come. And this is the part that never moves. Every other bill in your life answers to you. Run the air less, the bill drops. Drive less, the gas drops. This one doesn't move. You can't conserve your way out of a floor plan. It's the only household bill in America that gets calculated with a tape measure. Number 8. Put there by the one bill a family can't argue down. Number 7. Baltimore, Maryland. Baltimore is the rare American city where a black family can still buy in and still be the majority when they do. Just over 60% of the city is black, and it's the third most affordable major metro in the country for a black family buying a starter home, at about 23% of local median black household income. In Park Heights and Cherry Hill, a row house costs less than a down payment in the DMV suburbs an hour up the road. Now here's what the listing left out. The energy bill in this metro isn't a utility, it's a second landlord. The American Council for an Energy-Efficient Economy found that 1 in 4 households in the Baltimore area pays more than a quarter of everything it earns to keep the lights on and the house warm. A quarter. That's not a bill, that's a tenancy. And underneath it sits the water. Baltimore used to put a lien on a house over an unpaid water bill as small as $350, and roughly 70% of the customers whose homes went to tax sale were black or people of color. $350. That's a lien, a break job, and a bad Tuesday, and only one of the 3 can take a house off you. Residential water-only liens got barred after the fight over it, which is real progress. But renters never got out from under it, because a landlord's unpaid bill can still put the building in the tax sale, and nobody's calling the tenant to explain that. A city review turned up more than 22,000 malfunctioning meters, throwing out wrong bills. Rates climbed about 30% after 3 straight years of 10% increases, and until the city council took the question up, a Baltimore renter had no legal right to even see the water bill charged against the home they were living in. So in Sandtown, Winchester, there are black families paying a bill they aren't allowed to read. How exactly do you dispute a number nobody will show you? That's why Baltimore is number 7 on this list. 2 utilities and a filing cabinet, and only one of the 3 is something a tenant is allowed to see. Number 6. Jacksonville, Florida. Ask somebody in Moncrief who owns the houses on their street, and you'll get the same answer you get in Durkeeville and Newtown. Just some company. Folks don't know which one. The rent gets paid to a portal, and the landlord has an investor relations page. Jacksonville is one of the great cheap rent stories of the South for black families. Warm, working, a real black middle class, houses with yards instead of hallways, and institutional investors now own roughly 21% of the single-family rental homes in the city. In 2021, there were 4 Jacksonville zip codes where investors took more than 40% of every single-family home that sold. Not rented, sold. Nationally, Brookings put institutional investors at 29% of all single-family home purchases in 2023 and 30% in 2024, and during the pandemic, those firms concentrated their buying in Black and Hispanic neighborhoods that already had the highest housing instability. Now, is the rent in those houses outrageous? Not usually, no. That's the part people get wrong. The rent is competitive, because it has to be, because these firms are underwriting against your paycheck and they know exactly what it is. Here's the cost. A Georgia State analysis of 1 million metro Atlanta home sales found investor conversion of single-family homes into rentals was a leading reason Black home ownership fell there. You don't feel that one monthly. You feel it in 10 years, when the block you rented on has no houses left to buy, and the equity that was supposed to be yours belongs to a fund that has never driven down your street. Sixth on this list, and what comes back here, isn't the rent. It's the door out of renting. That's 5 down and 5 to go. If this is landing so far, leave a like, drop a subscribe, and switch the bell on, because we take one of these apart every week. Back to the countdown, and the top 5 get worse. Number 5, Indianapolis, Indiana. Indianapolis is the easiest city on this list to move to, and that turns out not to be a compliment. It's affordable, it's central, the houses are solid brick, and Black families have been building on the Far East Side and in Martindale-Brightwood for generations. About 26% of local median Black household income covers a starter home here. It works on paper, and it works on the tour. Then you read what the lease actually bought you. Indiana is one of only 4 states in the country with no law letting a tenant withhold rent or repair a problem and deduct it. Not a weak one, none at all. Your furnace dies in January, and your legal options are ask nicely or move. And a landlord has to give you 10 days' notice before filing on you for non-payment. 10. That's shorter than the return window on a mattress. The Fair Housing Center of Central Indiana counted nearly 19,000 eviction cases filed in Marion County in the first 9 months of 2025 alone. That's 14.2 filings for every 100 renter households, the 6th highest rate of any city the Eviction Lab tracks. More than 116,000 filings between 2021 and 2025. And 50 property owners account for over half of them, a lot of them out-of-state firms filing on autopilot. On the Far East Side, there are nearly 2,000 single-family rentals, and more than 1,200 of them are owned from another state. 3 firms alone hold 562. So a Black family moves to Indianapolis for the cheapest good house in the Midwest, and what they've rented is a home with no repair rights, a 10-day fuse, and a landlord who has never seen the porch. That's why Indianapolis is number 5 on this list. The rent bought a roof. It didn't buy any standing under it. Number 4, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. In Sherman Park, a Black family can still rent a whole house with a basement and a garage, around $1,181 a month. Milwaukee is also the city where that same family is most likely to end up standing in front of a judge over it. Start with the national number. Black renters are 28% of the people renting and 39% of the people getting filed on. That gap is bad enough the Eviction Lab writes about it every year. Now here's Milwaukee. In Greater Milwaukee, Black residents are 36% of the renter population and 66% of the 2025 eviction filings. 2/3 of the filings, from 1/3 of the renters. The national gap is 11 points. Milwaukee's is 30. The Milwaukee Independent traced the filings by zip and found something the number alone won't tell you. In 53206, 53209, and 53210, a handful of landlord entities file hundreds of cases a year, most of them registered through shell corporations, one of them turning up in more than 150 eviction cases over 2 years while holding property under at least 6 different LLCs. On the north side of Milwaukee, that's a business model, with a courthouse attached. And the filing is the product. It doesn't have to end in a sheriff at the door to work. It sits on your record, and every leasing office in the county runs the same background check, and from then on, you pay the higher deposit, or the extra fee, or you take the worse unit, for years, off a case you might have won. That's what puts Milwaukee at number 4. So how cheap is the rent, really, when a third of the renters absorb 2/3 of the filings, and the filing itself reprices everything you rent for the rest of your life? Number 3. Memphis, Tennessee. Talk to enough people in Fraser and Whitehaven, and you'll hear the same thing about the courthouse downtown. Everybody's been down there. Nobody thinks it says anything about them. Memphis is a beautiful, cheap, deeply black city where average asking rent ran about $1,152 last year, and a family can rent a 3-bedroom for what a 1-bedroom costs in Nashville. That's the pitch, and the pitch is honest. Here's the volume. About 27,658 eviction cases were filed in Shelby County in 2025. Not judgments, just filings. MLK 50 went through them and found that roughly 10,000 of those, close to a third of everything filed in the entire county, came out of just 100 apartment complexes. One complex out in Cordova filed on 420 tenant households in a single year. That's 8 families a week from one address, all year. 100 addresses put a third of a county in front of a judge. That's not a rental market. That's a shift schedule. And the eviction lab found that about 81% of the Memphis renters who faced eviction in a recent 12-month stretch were black, in a city where black residents are about 67% of renters. Now let's be fair to Memphis, because the city didn't invent this. Harvard's Joint Center for Housing Studies has more than half of Shelby County renters cost-burdened, and nearly a third of them severely burdened, which means the rent that looks cheap from Chicago is not cheap against a Memphis paycheck. Cheap is a comparison to somewhere else. Affordable is what's left over after the check clears. Memphis is the first, and not the second. In Orange Mound 40 years ago, a black family could hold a house on one income. What you get now is the same house at a price that works right up until one thing goes wrong. That's why Memphis is number 3 on this list. Not because it's cruel, because the removal machine runs at industrial scale, and black families feed it at a rate their own numbers can't explain. Number 2. Little Rock, Arkansas. Picture the 10th day. You're behind on rent, you got the written notice, you've been calling about a check that's coming, and the 10th day arrives. In most of America, that's when your landlord goes to civil court. In Arkansas, that's when you can be charged with a crime. Arkansas is the only state in the country where failing to leave after a rent default is a criminal matter. The statute goes back to 1901. You can be 1 day late, get the 10-day notice, stay past it, and the state can fine you $1 to $25 for every additional day you're in the home. Legal Aid of Arkansas still walks tenants through it as live law, and they name the strangest part of it. The judge can't actually use it to put you out. It doesn't remove anybody. All it does is turn a renter into a defendant. A repeal bill went to the legislature in 2021 and didn't pass. A federal challenge got dismissed in 2022 after the tenants who brought it left the state, which tells you how these usually get resolved. And here's who has been standing in that courtroom. Researchers at the Bowen School of Law found that 62% of the failure to vacate affidavits filed in Little Rock Criminal Court in 2012 were brought against black women. Pulaski County hears more of these than anywhere else in the state. $1 a day. Arkansas will criminalize folks at layaway prices. So think about what the cheap rent in Southwest Little Rock is actually priced against. Not a bad neighborhood, not a long commute. It's priced against a criminal charge for the sin of being short. Black families move to Arkansas to stop being one bad month away from a crisis. And in this one state, Being short isn't a debt, it's a charge. Second on this list, in the only state in America where the 10th day comes with a case number. Number 1. Cleveland, Ohio. Every other city on this list takes money. Cleveland takes something you can't earn back. Now don't get me wrong, Cleveland earned the people it has. Average asking rent runs around $995. About 27% of local median black household income covers a starter home. Cleveland is one of the last big American cities where a black family can rent a whole house on one working income, and Glenville, Buckeye Woodhill, and Mount Pleasant are neighborhoods with churches, block clubs, and 4 generations on the same street. Nobody moves to Cleveland by accident. Now the housing stock. HUD found that more than 90% of Cleveland's rental units were built before 1978, which is the year they banned lead paint for consumers. So the cheap rent in this city is, in a very literal sense, old paint. Here's the number. In Glenville, 40.4% of kindergartners have a history of an elevated blood lead level. 40%. St. Clair Superior is 36.2%. Broadway Slavic Village is 34.6%. Buckeye Woodhill is 34%. Around 1,500 Cleveland children are poisoned every year, and some of them are living in homes that had already been certified lead-safe. Cleveland has a real answer here. The city says the rate has come down over the past decade, and it has. Cleveland's own health director also says it's still the highest in the country, more than double Detroit, Toledo, Akron, or Cincinnati. Both of those things are true at once, and only one of them is any use to a 5-year-old on Parkgate Avenue. And the repair work isn't arriving. Under a federal grant that started in 2020, the city projected 312 Glenville homes made LEED safe by May 2025. By June, it had finished 35 houses in 5 years, in the neighborhood with the worst numbers in the country. What is a mother in Glenville supposed to read into that? LEED doesn't take your money. It takes points off a child's reading score, and it takes them permanently, and there is no program in this country that gives them back. A family did everything they were told to do. They left the expensive city. They found the affordable house. They got the yard, and the house was the thing. Toledo turns the water off. Cleveland just leaves the paint on. Cleveland isn't number 1 because it's the worst city on this list. It's number 1 because everywhere else, the cheap rent costs you money. And here, the cheap rent gets charged to somebody who never signed anything. The rent is the only number in these cities anybody ever bothered to advertise. Everything that goes and gets it back shows up later, in a different envelope, with your zip code already on it. That isn't a reason to stay broke in a city that's eating you alive. It's a reason to price the whole thing before you sign, and to walk into that leasing office already knowing what the water gets billed on, how many days the notice runs, and how old the paint is. Now argue with me, because somebody's about to anyway. Which of these 10 got ranked too kindly, and which one belongs further up than I had it? Say it below, and say why. Hit like if the second bill has ever caught you, and subscribe if you want the rest of these, because there are folks in every one of these cities who found out the hard way. Because the cheapest cities in America for black families aren't lying about the rent. They're just very quiet about everything that comes after it.